well, welcome to the watch list. Wow, do we have an explosive episode for you today? Pun totally intended. Here we are at the watch list where we're looking at film through the lens of faith. And today we bought into the hype. We're ready to go because we head towards Barbieheimer or whatever we end up calling this thing. We're doing Barbie and Oppenheimer today, but I want to make sure you know I'm Russ Matthews from Real Dialogue, and
I'm Laura from Hope 1032.
I got to ask you, Laura, before we kind of get into it, did you do the whole thing where you go see Barbie first and then Oppenheimer straight after, or did you kind of pace yourself a little bit?
I mean, this would be a really, really long movie marathon if you genuinely do them back to back. Like, it's about 5 hours plus trailers on each, so you're looking at pretty much a full day's commitment. So I went and saw Barbie on a separate evening, and then I went and saw Oppenheimer on another evening. I wasn't going to do the two back to back, but I think it genuinely is worth seeing both of these movies because we'll get into it a little bit more, but I feel like each helps you appreciate the other in oddly unique ways. So the timing of this has just kind of fortuitously happened where you are getting the opportunity to see both because it's well worth it.
Well, what's fascinating is that they really sit on opposite ends of the spectrum as far as the type of films that they are. But yeah. I look forward to kind of looking at it. Well, when we get started right into it, I'm going to have you go through, kind of tell us a little bit about Barbie. We might as well start with pink and all of the things that come with Barbie Land.
Humans only have one ending.
Get that Barbie!
Ideas live forever.
It is the story of the famous doll, of course. I feel like there has been so much press coverage about this. If you've not heard about it, if you're not kind of across it, I'd be surprised. And heads up as well, before we dive totally into this episode, there's absolutely going to be spoilers of Barbie. There's absolutely going to be spoilers of Oppenheimer because you cannot review these movies properly without really going into them completely. So that's fair warning on that. But directed by Greta Gerwig, co-written with her husband Noah Baumbach, it is Barbie is the story of stereotypical Barbie at the front, played by Margot Robbie, who is living in Barbie land, starts to have these human emotions. She starts to feel a sense of loss, grief, and awareness of death, these different elements that feel very foreign to her. And so when she goes to talk to Weird Barbie, who's played by Kate McKinnon, Weird Barbie says, you know what you got to do to work out why this is happening and what's going on is enter into the real world so you can see the connection between the human that is playing with you as a doll and why you're starting to now feel these very human things. So off stereotypical Barbie goes into the real world to get a grasp of why her Barbie land world is starting to feel a little bit less than perfect day in, day out. And as you will have seen in the trailers, you don't just have Margot Robbie as Barbie in this. You've got multiple different kinds of Barbies, multiple different kinds of Ken, although Ryan Gosling's is the best one, of course. So they have kind of broadened the idea of who and what Barbie can be and can do.
Right, exactly. There you go. That's a pretty good setup. I think you did pretty good without spoiling it too much as far as what that goes. I haven't seen a movie hyped like this in so long. Did it live up to it for you?
Well, we have really different opinions about this movie already, I know. Because for me, when I see a film hyped like this, I already think this is going to be terrible because as someone who's gone to a bunch of different screenings over the years, here's a little inside story for you ladies and gentlemen. When you go to a screening, normally you might get a nice free popcorn, you might get a drink of water, love that. If you go to a screening and they give you popcorn and canapes and maybe a glass of wine, some champagne, you know that movie is not going to be great. So when I saw the amount of press that Barbie was getting and how immersive their marketing has been, from candles to shirts to fossil wallets inspired by Barbie, I've seen that this week. Exactly. My first thought was, this is going to be horrible. But then when I went in, I genuinely was pleasantly surprised by how clever the movie is. I was not expecting it to be clever. I know you disagree with me on this, but I honestly was like, where are they going to go with this? I
find it clever, but keep going. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I just thought there's an intellectual layering to this movie that I wasn't expecting. I wasn't expecting it to be dumb because Greta Gerwig is a fantastic director and the way that she approaches storytelling is really well done, but I just was not expecting them to have as many layers in the thinking behind what they've done with this story as they did. But give
Right.
me your face value, because there's so much more to say about this movie. But what were your first impressions?
Oh yeah. Okay. Now I mean, don't, you're setting me up like I'm gonna come. "Rah, I hated this movie. I didn't hate the movie because the thing is, I really appreciate Greta Gerwig. I love Little Women. I thought it was a great film. The only thing that really kind of got me. I mean, there's a few other nuances that we can discuss as we kind of go through this whole thing. But my initial reaction, because I kept sitting there going, "What's going on? Why am I just really uncomfortable with this film?" Not just because I don't want to be a Ken, but as based on the film. I don't feel like this is for the target audience with all the hype that they were doing, all the things that they were trying to do, even getting moms and daughters to go out and see this film together. This is a film for older, not just, I mean, a more mature audience. It's not for your 7-year-old little girl who's going to be walking in with her favorite Barbie doll and looking forward to kind of see this. And so because I have three daughters and a son, but three daughters who kind of look like Barbie. They have long blonde hair. They got them as gifts, and so we can appreciate what Barbie kind of brought into our household. And so to think that you would take your little daughter to go see this movie, I don't think it's right, because the film, as you said, it has layers. It's very mature. It's dealing with some deep existential elements. I mean, I got to tell you, the America Ferrera character has to be hands down one of my favorite characters in all of the film. Even though I thought Margot Robbie did a really good job in her role. I'm sorry, none of the Kens did anything for me, but we can talk about that in a little bit. Not that, but here, okay. But before we kind of continue on, though, I will have to openly admit it to you, and we'll have to say I am not the target audience for this film. And so I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting for this to be a 5-star for me. The thing that only disappointed me was it kind of like going, oh, we marketed this as if it was really meant to be a mother and daughter experience. And it's really more for the mothers who played with Barbies and kind of have a skeptical view of that themselves. You tell me what you think of those thoughts, and
Yeah.
where we can go
Well,
from there.
look, I mean, I don't have kids myself, but I feel like to me it comes back to the different ways they're speaking throughout the movie. So overall, like if you're wondering what does Barbie do, it does have, as a movie with certain kind of intentions, it speaks to the role of patriarchy in society, the role of matriarchy in society, and the intersection between men and women. How do they work well together? What are the expectations around that? What is the role of a woman in a family? Like these are big, heady ideas.
They
Like
are.
this is not little. And it doesn't have like there are some surprising perspectives it brings to that, because when a movie has a female led cast, when a movie is going to talk about that kind of feminine role within society, you can feel, and even I do this, I kind of go, okay, where's this going to go? Like what's it going to tell me I'm meant to look like as a woman? Like even as a woman who's happy to be a woman, there are certain sort of stereotypical ways of putting that message on screen that I can feel uneasy about. Like I don't want to back what they are doing with what they think it looks like to be a strong, confident woman in the world, right? So I was curious to know what they were going to do with that. And from the level of someone who is a child watching this, I think what a kid would take away from Barbie is that women, girls, even the Kens to a degree, you can be what you want to be. And I don't mean that in that generic, we have no basis for identity type way that can sound, like the live
Right.
your own idea type conversation.
Sure.
It's more that if you have an idea of what you want to achieve, if you have a certain sense of who you feel you are, in the word we might use, called to be, what arena you feel like you want to go into, you can do that. Like from a kid's perspective, I think they'll get the message that if there's an idea of what you want to do in life, you can go after it. Like that's the encouragement and the level that I think this movie will meet kids at. But then for the mums watching it, or even the women without children who are a little bit older that watch this, I
Sure.
think what we hear is a way more nuanced discussion about the messages women receive, about who and what they are and aren't supposed to be. Like the complexity and the contradictory versions of what that should be. Like America Ferrera's character you mentioned, she's kind of the epicenter of that. Like whether you're experiencing anxiety, whether you've got an identity crisis as you've transitioned through the different phases of your life, like she kind of represents the everyday woman in
Right.
this Barbie world. So I don't know that I wouldn't say that it's not appropriate for kids, because it does stick to its PG rating in terms of the superficial viewing of this movie is very PG. But if you're an older woman, like essentially an adult watching this movie, you're going to see through it at another level that is a bit more mature and a bit deeper.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No. I definitely give you that. I won't agree with you. I don't necessarily think that little girls will really appreciate it. I mean, I think that
Hmm.
most of them would walk out going, "What was that about? That wasn't a Barbie adventure. That was
Yeah,
like
yeah.
something weird." But it's pretty. I mean, it's definitely pretty and beautiful,
Yeah.
and it has all these different elements. Probably the other part is, and again, this is saying it from a position of. This is not me as far as a target audience.
Mm.
This there wasn't very many positive views of men in any way, and so it was kind of like Ken was uh, set up as adult. He left as adult at the end. I'm sorry, no, sorry, but and they kind of coming down heavy on the patriarchy, which I can appreciate and I understand, within this world, and I understand that there's a reality to that. But they kind of went the opposite end as far as kind of the solution, opposed to kind of, oh, can we work together harmoniously and then can we make this happen? Now they kind of went to the opposite end of it with their answer and solution, which I get it. It's a satire. They're meant to kind of be making fun, taking it to the extremes. They're meant to show men in their extreme, women in their extreme, and I totally get that. So I'm not missing the nuance of that element, but also I'm not too sure too many men are going to go, oh yeah, maybe educating ourselves. Honestly, the speech that America Ferrera did right in the middle of the film, if that didn't get everybody's attention and go, exactly, kind of understanding, I don't know if you really could fully understand the female mind if you aren't a woman yourself. But it really opened up the doors to understanding that so much of it, some of it is society, but so much too is within the kind of how the inner speak of women. I think that was an educational piece that I could say I
Mm.
really took as a man. But I'm not sure too many men are going to go, yeah, no. But I will admit to you, Ken has never been the model of male
No, maybe
representation.
not. But like it's interesting just how many varying perspectives there are on this movie. Like I don't know that I've seen such like a film that really divides the audience
Yeah,
so distinctly, and not just between men and women at
no,
all. Like I do know guys that have loved it. I know women that have not enjoyed it. Like it's a movie that is so subjective in how you're going to interpret it, because when I saw the way that the Kens were represented, yeah, there's a comedic, like one of my favorite scenes is when Ryan Gosling's Ken is like, I'm gonna take you out and play guitar at you and serenade you, and then there's this whole scene with all the different Kens trying to woo the Barbies with their guitar skills, and it's hilarious. But then in the way that they represented that, I read that, and yeah, granted, I'm seeing this as a girl, so fine. But I saw them as almost celebrating, like to me, I actually saw that the way that they were using the exaggeration to say that men are so much more than the stereotype of what it can look like to
right.
be this guy trying to charm the woman. And even where they land it, this movie does not end with a message that says if women in power is better or men in power is better. They actually point out the fact that it's not healthy to have one gender or the other, whichever way it lands, in complete authority. Like that is not the way it's supposed to be. There's meant to be this healthy coexistence.
Huh.
And I was really glad that that's where they took it. And also the speech that Barbie kind of has with Ken toward the end. And it's a conversation. It's not so much a speech, but there's this real thing to say that you have an identity. I have an identity. We share one together, but we also have to have a healthy understanding of who we are individually, which is so contradictory, or at least countercultural to so much of the messaging around how males and females should interact, like as if one has to be wholly dependent on the other. I just found what they did with this movie so unexpected in a lot of ways.
There you
And
go.
everyone's gonna have such different interpretations depending on their context, and absolutely gender is gonna play into how you see this movie.
Well, and it's actually because I was even having a conversation about this over dinner last night because everybody's asking about this movie. These two films are getting more people talking about films, which I love. So I mean, I would honestly encourage people, if you're going to have to most likely see it so that you can have a conversation over the next few weeks because everybody's talking about this movie. But I think that it definitely will have a different feel for everyone who goes to see it. But I say
Mm,
also take some time to just talk about it, opposed to saying love it, hate it. And what is it about that you really liked and what did you really get from it? That's
yeah.
probably where we always kind of go with the watch list. What would be that further conversation? What is it? I
Mm.
mean, I think we've already had a few of them, but like what would be the landing point? If you were to get one point across from this movie, what would it be for you?
I think it's that it just gives you while not a complete picture of women's experience in the world, it certainly gives you space to think about how women experience life. And yes, it's narrowed down largely to American women because this is an
That's right.
American movie. It's the real world that it takes you into is America, LA.
That's
That's what it
right.
says the world looks like, which is obviously not
Right.
the world that so many women live in. But there's a scene on Venice Beach, the one where Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling are in the famous roller skates, the glow roller skates that we've seen them in,
That's
where
right.
everyone's looking at them. They do not look like everyone else in the real world. But when Barbie is receiving attention from people, even though it's the exact same people looking from her to then looking at Ken, when she's looked at, that can feel like a threat. That can
Right.
feel like there's danger in this. Whereas when Ken's being looked at, he sees it as like, hey, I'm the man. I'm being looked at. Like, and I just thought that's the exact same behavior. They're both being looked at from like left to right, each get looked at, but there is just such a difference in how the female experience of that can be compared to the male experience. And if this movie does anything, I think it just gives you an insight into what it can look like to be a woman walking in the world versus what it can look like to be a man walking in the world.
Yeah, it's because I that's actually a really good perspective. I didn't even think about that scene and how that it did because it was from going from Barbie Land, her utopia, to the real world. It completely shifted as far as how people looked at her and their treatment of her. So I can totally appreciate that. I
What would
think
your
that
one takeaway be?
Oh, like you said, there are so many. Depends on kind of the audience, but I would probably have to say, I think one of the things, even taking it back, even to kind of a biblical framework, that God really had a plan when He created men and women, and we have roles, but we're meant to work together, and we were designed to come together and really kind of work to make it a better world or to care for the world that we're in, and so what you see in a film like this is that it does kind of pushes you to the extremes on the opposite ends as far as where we sit, but yet we're really meant to be working together in a cohesive atmosphere. And so I think that that's one of the things that always kind of stands out for me, especially when you put it, like we say, we're putting it through a biblical lens,
Hmm.
is that the world, even the world's solution, that's why probably wasn't that satisfying for me at the end. The world solution wasn't satisfying opposed to looking at what God's solution, and He had it really from all the way from the beginning of time all the way through His story. And so I think that really stood out for me. And when I talk with people about it, if I take something away, not only the fact that I did get to see definitely a woman's world of The View, and I can really appreciate that, even though I have a wife and 3 daughters, and granddaughters. But I think that it really helped to educate me that way. But I think too is really kind of seeing a film like this through a biblical lens really kind of helped me.
Isn't it interesting that you see it that way? Because I when I earlier said I don't always love these movies that kind of get put in the feminist box, it's because I don't personally think, while I absolutely support women being in a variety of roles and having greater voice in society 100%, I don't think you should have women completely in power, but I also don't think you should have men completely in power. Like, I
Right.
see that there is a healthy dynamic
Yeah.
to work toward where we and everyone else in society work collectively in a healthy, cohesive manner. So the way I saw this movie take that message, because I always go in going, where are they going to take this? Because if this just ends as like girls who run the world girls, that's going to bug me so much. Like, that's going to really annoy me. But I don't think they landed like that. I thought they actually
That's so
did
fascinating.
land with a much healthier, not entirely biblical, but I did think they kind of took it that way where they said, it's not meant to be you or me. It's meant to be us. And we each have to have an understanding of who we are individually for that joint experience to be healthy and well. Like, it's just so, and it's so
It is.
interesting to me how
We're
you can
putting it.
completely see this movie in such different ways. So there's going to be great discussion once you watch
Oh,
this movie if you haven't already.
and that's what we'd say. We definitely. I mean, I don't know. It sounds like you definitely put this on your watch list.
Uh-huh, yeah. And I would put it on my watch list because I think
Mm.
it's worth watching this movie for yourself so you have your own interpretation of it, and because there's such interesting discussions that can come from it, and also just as a movie, like, it is just fun. Like,
Right.
I laughed a lot in this movie. So don't think that you're going to be going into this pink wonderland of heady thinking. It's actually just a really fun, ridiculous movie, as well as being something that kind of, without necessarily doing it totally at the front, it makes you think more deeply than you realize or thought you were going to when you first went in.
There you go. Very good. Well, I would say you can put it on the watch list for those very reasons, to have that conversation, be able to have that discussion, have your own opinion. I do kind of tire of people watching somebody on YouTube. Funny enough that we're doing it. That's kind of ironic, I know. But and then they don't go because of that, opposed to going and just having your own opinion. Now,
Yeah.
I will have to admit, I don't want to watch this movie again myself.
See, I'm going to watch it again because I feel like there's going to be more in it that I didn't catch the first time. But
Right.
definitely, like, for those of you watching, comment in
Yes,
the comment
please,
section
please
on
do.
this, because what we've seen in it may be completely different to what you've seen in it. Tell us, because I'd be curious to know how everyone else has interpreted this movie.
Me too. Well, that's actually why I really enjoy this aspect of the watch list. So we come from different perspectives. We have different life, we're in that different place. And so we can probably enjoy or maybe not enjoy films for different reasons, but we can have that discussion.
So,
I love this.
take us into to Oppenheimer then, Russ.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3,
Truman needs to know what's next.
2,
What's next?
1.
A sharp left turn into World War II now, with Cillian Murphy leading the charge. And Christopher Nolan directing this too, of course, behind The Dark Knight, Interstellar, like all the things. Before we go into your takeaway, set up the story for those who don't know.
Well, because some people would go, why are we watching a movie about somebody who made the atom bomb? There's a reason, and it is really fascinating. What's interesting in the history of it, that Robert Pattinson, the actor who was in Tenet, gave the book, the 2005 biography of the American Prometheus by Kai Bird, to Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan read this and he said, I've got to make this into a movie. And so it ended up becoming this film, and it's about Oppenheimer. He was in charge of kind of the development of the nuclear weapons in what's called the Manhattan Project. And it occurred in Los Alamos during World War II. It was a race with the Nazis to get the first one to be able to make the first atomic bomb. And the thing is that these were the best minds of the world at the time, and they're brilliant people brought together by the military, funded by the military, to be able to go through and put together not only the atom bomb, but there was also a nuclear bomb that was actually being kind of designed at the exact same time in the same place. But it shows not just the making of it and also the detrimental impact that it had, but also shows you that brilliant people could still not know what they are really doing and really releasing on the world the atomic age in a way. And that's what I really want to value before we kind of get into it, was that it not just showed the making of it and also the impact of it, but then also what happened afterwards for him to all of a sudden, as a scientist, as someone who wanted to further advance science in the world, would actually be the one that unleashed death on the world and also took us into this age that we still live in, where we're really the fear of atomic bombs and nuclear bombs falling on us all the time. Then on top of it, it has an amazing cast, and it is 3 hours long. But I'm going to probably have to say to you that you almost need every single minute to really get the full story. So anyway, that would be my kind of my setup, as it were.
And not a minute of it is wasted, because when I saw that this was 3 hours long, I thought, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go in. Yes, it's Christopher Nolan. Yes, it's a really interesting look at a very significant time in history. But I thought, who makes these movies? I always think if you're making a 3-hour movie, that is not for the audience who has stuff to do, lives to live. That is because of the director and the creative team behind these movies' desire to make something. Like that's for them. But I will say, in sitting there for the full 3 hours, you're right. They needed all of it. They don't waste it, and it doesn't feel like it drags on. For one, because there's just so much richness in the story, but also because they have this kind of constant rumbling going, in the sound of it all, and not like it's this monotone thing through it, but the soundtrack really helps this movie carry on in a way that doesn't make you go, oh, come on now, I need to get moving. So,
well, see, that's the thing I love about Christopher Nolan, in that you really can't really put his films into categories because they're so different. I mean, like you mentioned, Dark Knight at one end, you've got Memento, you've got Inception, but then you have a movie like this is this biopic that's incredible, epic, and then these great cast members. I mean, every single person lifted their game, even if they were only in the film for maybe 2 to 5 minutes, they still brought something of value to it. But Murphy was amazing. I mean, he was in, like, I think about 99% of the film and was just incredible. He's been one to watch for years anyway, but he is just a talented man, and really immersed himself and really made this very convincing. But then on top of it, it showed the brilliance of the man of who Oppenheimer really was, but then also how flawed he was too, and that he wasn't a perfect man. Just because he's brilliant in one area of life doesn't necessarily mean that he's great in all areas of life, as far as morality and his choices and the things that he's done. Even the making of the atomic bomb, I think he kind of, in which, just so you know, he's not the only one. It's not like he's one tinkering in his garage, like putting it all together. I mean, it was a whole city in essence that they brought together to kind of make this whole project come to life. But then on top of it, the Matt Damon character showing how the military utilized these talents, made it all happen. But once it was done, they pretty much kind of turned their back on the man. You know, I mean, they kind of said, "Oh, but we're out of here," you know, kind of thing. And I really loved how they showed that, like, going here, this great, amazing achievement, but then it all gets packed up in a box and heads out, and that was it, you know, kind of thing. And so I felt like they really captured really what happens with so many of us when it kind of comes to, we have these big projects, we have this great opportunity, we see it come to fruition, then all of a sudden, oh, that's it. Was that really what I put my identity in? So it was really fascinating what they were able to capture in that 3 hours. Is that it is quite an investment of your life and your time.
And you almost, and you almost need to look at it in kind of different sort of chunks or different, again, layers, if you want to look at it that way, because you've got the character of Oppenheimer, who is his own thing through this movie, whether you're looking at his amazing mind or even the way that he never fully aligned himself. And one of the reasons that he gets sort of assessed, he gets like dragged before a court of sorts to look at who his true allegiances were with and why he wanted to be involved. Part of the reason that he had so much suspicion directed his way was because he never, at least in the way he's represented in the movie, he never had a very clear allegiance. Like, yes, his activities supported the American government, but he was also open to hear the perspectives of other political parties.
That's right.
Like, he didn't ever fully align with one thing. He just was open to hear what everyone had to say, and his mission was around the science. So he was a guy that had his own personal complexities, but then he also did wrestle with the responsibility. Like, even though he's not the one that presses the button for the atomic bomb and what we see happen in Japan, he's the guy that helped lead the team that makes it. So where does the responsibility lie? Which is a really timely, pertinent conversation about weapons manufacturing. Like, it's another, the same thing that's used around firearm proliferation of guns don't kill people, people kill people. It's that kind of dynamic of who's responsible for the outcome of what you make and what you do. And then if you want to draw that back to a more personal, relatable level for each of us who aren't involved in weapons manufacturing, it's like in what we do in our day in, day out lives, you know, I'm sure we all have such different jobs, and you might work for a company whose overarching ethos you don't necessarily support, but you got to put, you know, food on the table. You've got to achieve an outcome.
That's right.
It's like, who has the responsibility for the sort of the cog in the machine that we are responsible for? The outcomes of that, where does responsibility lie? Like, there's really interesting social conversations to be brought into this. And I will say, having watched Barbie, then watching Oppenheimer, to tie these two together for a second, it was interesting to me to go from a movie that was all the women, all the voices, to one that was the men talking in rooms, very little female screen time, which is genuinely, I'm not making a slide about it, because Oppenheimer is about a time in history. It's a reality.
Sure.
So
it's a reality.
You know, don't fake this and shove women in there when that's not what the story was, right? I'm not saying that at all. But it was just really interesting to me to go from something that shows imagine if women ruled the world. Look at what this situation looks like with guys in charge of this. And even in, you know, you mentioned that they didn't really know what they were doing. There's a scene when you've got the team who are working on this atomic bomb and there is a woman involved in it, they kind of say to her, like, are you sure you want to be here? Like, you realize that being exposed to radioactive material could affect your reproductive organs. And she's
And
like,
she
in my paraphrase, she's like, guys, yours are more exposed than mine. Like, who's really at risk here? And they didn't know what to do with it. But you kind of,
That's right.
it's a funny gender moment, but it's also a reflection of the fact these people had no clue what they were doing. Like, you all were doing something really dangerous.
Before we finish our time, a couple things I did want to say about the film too that I thought was worth saying, but then also something that I felt was incredible was one. This is a very mature film, so I really want to make sure and that's the other thing about the whole marketing of putting Barbie with Oppenheimer. I'm going, Oppenheimer is definitely not one for little kids.
No.
It's for people with discerning tastes, because there are scenes that are very kind of confronting in Oppenheimer's past that still artistically work, but they aren't necessarily something for everybody. So just kind of understand that. And that's why the rating is what it is. But two, this is all done with practical effects. There was no CGI in this film, which is incredible to think that they were able to do all of this. And they actually, all the building of the bomb and even the explosions that happen, just so you are aware, they don't show the Nagasaki and Hiroshima's bombings and all the things. They talk about the after effects, but they don't show it, which is actually, I find, really quite respectful, honestly. But for me, probably the way it would land on this, no pun intended, again, I'm doing all these puns, is that this is an amazing film. And I love Christopher Nolan. He's had great films. He's had mediocre films, but he's had great films. Even his mediocre ones are better than most others films, but I can't say, this is better than Dark Knight, or this is better than Dunkirk. They're different films, but yet this one kind of takes him to a new level of storytelling. And this goes to what you were saying even about Barbie. These are two different stories told two different ways, using very different methods of telling story, but still they're worthwhile engaging with, even though I would probably choose Oppenheimer over Barbie as far as my choice. But I'll be honest with you, I don't know if I'm going to sit through 3 hours again either. So, as far as seeing this one too, that'd be a hard one to be able to say, I'm going to go, I'm going to commit this much time to it, but
maybe not twice.
It would be on my watch list.
No, it would be on my watch list, Oppenheimer, for sure. And I think it's a study in filmmaking. But the thing is, weirdly, they've become tied together because they're two of the biggest movies to be released this year, and they're wanting to drive support for cinema. So I don't think it was intentional. It kind of just fell together and became this thing. And now two movies are being talked about that maybe wouldn't have been have been enough brain space for both of them if this didn't happen. Like, one would have completely overwhelmed the other. And truth be told, it probably would have been Barbie, because the press and the coverage and the marketing immersion for that is so much more thorough. But Oppenheimer is such a valuable movie in what it brings to social conversation. Barbie is as well. And then Oppenheimer also has this dynamic of genuine skill in filmmaking. And as you mentioned, no CGI. There was an Aussie guy involved in actually bringing all of that to life.
That's right.
And it just is stunning. Like, you have to see it on the big screen if you can. And I recommend that for both of them, but especially Oppenheimer. Like, spend the extra bit of cash if you can. Go see it on the big screen and enjoy it.
I think that too, because even in the after effects, what it did for me with the conversations I had with those that I went with, but also ever since, I've had more conversations about God, about human heart, about so many things that it just opens up the floodgates of conversation. So that's what I loved about this film, as well as it was just great filmmaking.
Yeah, and you've just reminded me of one quick thing that we haven't touched on. Robert Downey Jr. in the support cast. Like, pretty much everyone in this movie is going to deserve some kind of Oscar nomination, if not a win. But he has this fantastic line that stood out to me the moment I heard him say it, where he says that genius does not equal wisdom, or along those lines. Like, you can have genius, that does not guarantee you wisdom. And that to me was massive, because Oppenheimer is one of the smartest guys out there. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's wise. And we prize genius so much in society, especially in the billionaire club. But is there wisdom connected to that genius too? And that's probably where there's a good biblical kind of conversation. What does true wisdom look like to have after watching this movie too? So we could go on, but
we could. We've actually come to the end. So you'd put Oppenheimer and Barbie on the watch
Yes,
list.
and
Is
let the
that right?
conversation happen in the comment section.
Please continue, and also subscribe to YouTube or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and understand and know, and also check out our reviews at Real Dialogue and also on Hope 103.2. You can find both of our reviews there, but also we're just glad to have you along. Please keep the conversation going. Can't wait to hear what you think about these films, because everybody should get out to see them. And so once you have, please come and tell us what you thought about it. And always remember, we're always here for you. When you're always out there grabbing the popcorn, taking a seat, seeing your movie, putting it through the lens of faith. Hopefully we'll see you next time on The Watch List.